just this whole description of how this FBI brief came to be released.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that?
More following the narrative that the prosecution has been putting forward about how outside the norm this is. It is unprecedented, very, very strange to release, first of all, law enforcement data. As we've heard and we've talked about before, how that has always been the common practice of the Attorney General to not release current investigation information. But on top of that, this is information that was sealed by a federal judge. And I just, for the public out there, a judge's order is a big deal. A federal judge is the biggest of big deals. These are people that have a lifetime appointment. They're essentially emperors.
Right.
The only person bigger than a federal district judge is the Circuit Court of Appeals that is over them and the U.S. Supreme Court. And so the idea that some attorney general in one of the 50 states could just say, you know what, I don't care about that federal judge's order sealing this information. We're going to release it anyways to the target of the investigation is pretty shocking. It was pretty damning, pretty outside the norm, which again just kind of follows that general theme of how unusual this is.
And I think it illustrates the audacity and arrogance of Ken Paxton, that he was quite willing to push through on this and to push his people to do it.
It's a pretty stunning display of, but again, I think what you see is over and over them showing just systematically how they went outside the norms of the office.
And how direct Paxton was involved. This isn't so-and-so told me that so-and-so said. This was Ken Paxton said, find another way.
Right.
This was Ken Paxton saying, I don't care what that is, I want you to do it this way.
I want this to happen, you find a way to make it happen.
Right.
To his staff.
Well, and Vassar said, that when the Kamek situation arose, I feel like the Kamek situation is the straw that breaks the camel's back, right? This is the one where they go, okay, first we had the open records thing, we had the foreclosure thing. We might not like it, but we can muddle through. But now we have subpoenas being issued,
right.
We have banks being served, we have requests, subpoenas for emails and phone records of law enforcement officers and magistrates and that kind of thing. So now we're in different territory.
And it brings up their own personal liability.
Right.
When it all breaks open.
We heard there, close to the end, how he talked about I didn't want to be a co-conspirator.
Well, he said the concern was that it would only get worse, and for us to be labeled co-conspirators.
And that's a big deal, especially if you're talking about something where the federal government is possibly prosecuting you.
Right.
If the feds decide that you have committed a crime, the number one charge that you see in federal prosecutions is conspiracy.
Yeah.
And that is how those indictments get so big and so nasty. And so, that was a very legitimate fear, especially considering that, a federal prosecutor could very easily allege that by releasing, information that had been sealed, that they had run afoul. And
right.
that if you were involved in that, then you ran afoul.
And I don't mean to minimize at all their concern for the public good. I think they are all very sincere about that. But I think self-preservation was kicking in, too, at this point.
Well, I also think that
there's some definite truth to that.
Yeah. I also think that there was, this was a continuation of a pattern, right? At first it's, that's strange, but they didn't have enough information. All the pieces hadn't kind of come together. But then after the foreclosure, there's this, there's that, they're adding on top of each other, then this happens. So it's a continuation of a pattern. They're starting to fit the pieces together, and then this one is so audacious, arguably violating a federal order, sealing records, giving away information from from the FBI. Again, we talked about it at the last break. The Attorney General is the top cop. He is
right.
the chief law enforcement officer in the state. And generally speaking, more than generally, every single time I can think of, law enforcement sides with law enforcement because they're all on the same team.
Exactly.
They're all prosecuting crime,
They're all
investigating
supposed to be
crime.
on the same team.
And so for them to, so we heard Ryan Vassar talk about how we reached out to the FBI as per usual, and then it gets released without the FBI even having a say. Again, that very, very strange.
Very strange. And I can understand the alarm that must have run through this group of people as the word spread about what was happening.
Well, yeah, because again, you have Kamek going out, and they haven't played the audio yet, and I don't know. I'm assuming they will, but when Kamek goes out to deliver the subpoenas, at least in one case, to one of the banks, he has the attorney representing Nate Paul with him.
Yes. Again, the audacity
So
is
strange.
breathtaking.
I cannot emphasize enough how rare that is.
This is
not rare.
It's
Unheard of.
unheard
Yeah,
It
that's
just
right.
doesn't
That's
happen.
far more than rare.
I mean, when I listened to that audio when they released all those documents a couple weeks ago, I just
Your jaw
my
dropped.
mouth dropped.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, I was going. Well, I'm not clear on who recorded this. Was it Kamek that recorded it? Was it the bank guy? I think it was probably Kamek because there's more than one of them. There's like a couple of audio recordings where they're going to deliver subpoenas, and I'm just,
Well,
my
which
mouth
makes
is
it even
dropping.
more astonishing that he would record that happening,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
Kamek would report.
Yeah,
Doesn't that seem even more astonishing?
I can tell you, I've never had a detective give me a call and say, "Hey, you represent so and so. Why don't you come down to the crime scene and we'll let you be involved?" Defendant's attorney. It's really shocking. On top of that, there's so much to unpack here. The more I think about it, it came out as a fairly dry presentation, and I think the defense did a good job. And we can talk about this more. The defense did a good job of interrupting the flow. The defense attorney was very successful with his objections, and I think he had Rusty hard and stumbling a little. But there was more to unpack there. The fact that, generally speaking, it's very common to put an independent outside counsel.
Right.
That happens all the time. It's a huge office. There's all sorts of issues. Sometimes there's specialized issues, and they don't have that many lawyers. So yeah, that's fine. But when it comes to a criminal investigation, they never have the jurisdiction to prosecute in that instance. And the fact that he drafts the contract the way they always draft the contract, and yet again, this is going to be the theme for the prosecution. Again, Ken Paxton says, no, not in this instance. When it's benefiting my buddy, that's going to be the theme. I want you to go outside the norm and do something completely unprecedented, and give him wide-ranging authority. All of that put together, it really is shocking.
And you're right. The theme is for my buddy.
Right.
We're going to do this way, this really unusual, anomalous way to benefit my buddy.
And we haven't heard it yet, but of course, the affair and the mistress and the fact that she works for my buddy.
Well, we heard some of that from Matir yesterday morning, which was, this whole description of how, the nexus is
it puts it all together.
It
because,
does.
Right now, if you're just hearing this out of context, if you haven't been following this, it's easy to say, I don't understand why he would do all this for this guy. There has to be a rational explanation. But then once you find out that there is a very rational explanation, it's just not okay. The rational explanation is that he's doing this so that, because you're giving me the keys to my mistress's apartment or whatever. That's pretty incredible.
Right. And because they're going to ask me about this, they got me in the 6 o'clock, so I'm curious. What are the biggest surprises to you guys today?
Well, I don't know why this surprises me, but I do think the scale of the audacity and the arrogance is astonishing. The sheer scale of it, the unprecedented nature of it, and the whole defense that the AG, of course he can do this.
Right.
He's the Attorney General. No.
That doesn't mean you can do anything. Yeah, I agree. I hate to not offer an additional surprise, but I completely agree it shouldn't be surprising, because before Dan Patrick issued the gag order, I can't remember, I think it was Rusty Hardin, said when all the facts are out, it's going to be shocking how audacious, I forget his exact words, but he told us that the scale of the audacity, the scale of how irregular was going to be really shocking. All the facts weren't out, wait till you hear. Well, we're hearing. I have followed this. I was aware of the basic allegations. I've read the articles of impeachment, more than your average person. When Rusty Hardin said that, I thought, oh, okay, get your popcorn ready. This is going to be interesting. Even knowing all that coming in today, that it still has surprised me how irregular all of this is.